Beha'alotcha, we have the lighting of the menorah, and there's Malbim that points out that it says Vayas Kain Aaron. Malbim brings a Yerushalmi. Malbim is not in the Parashat, it's on the Artzos Chaim, droshes of the Malbim. And the Malbim brings that if you look at the psukim when light was created by Hio, the first day, it does not say at the end by Hichen, and so it was, which it does say on all of the subsequent days of creation. Now, why didn't it say? The Yerushalmi says because that light was taken away and it was gone, it was hidden for tzaddikim lost at Lovay. The Malbim points out that now in the lighting of the menorah, by Yas Aaron Cain, Aaron brought back that Cain, that word Cain, that was missing, because some of that Or Hagonus, that hidden light, would be in the menorah, and his lighting of the menorah would bring it back to Klal Yisrael. So, beautiful idea that the Malbim, the Artzos Chaim, presents. Let's take it a bit further. That the Rashi says that lahagid, to give the praise of Aaron, lahagid b'shvocho shel Aaron shelo shino, that he didn't divert, he didn't depart from what he was commanded to do. Obvious question is, what's the havamina? Why would one think that Aaron, HaKohen of all people, would consider diverting and moving away from what he was commanded to do? Lighting of the menorah, the Ramban brings that was presented to Aaron as a pacifier for his frustration, his hurt at not participating with the korbanos of the Nesiim, the sacrifices of the Nesiim, to inaugurate the Mizbeach and the Mishkan. Is that he waited, he had a calculation, a cheshbon, and he didn't participate. And the Ramban says that the pacifier that is being offered, the compensation that is being offered to Aaron, is that when there is no Mishkan, there is no Beis Mikdash, then in fact we won't have a Mizbeach, you won't have Kabbalas. But your lighting of the candles will continue, because there'll be a Hanukkah, even in Golus, even in the Galut. Klal Yisrael will have the Chanukiah. That will continue and is not dependent on the presence of the Beis Mikdash, or the Mishkan being active. Obvious question is that the Chanukiah is lit by every Jew. The Yisrael, Levi, and Kohen. It's not something which is unique and specific to the Kohanim in Am Yisrael. So why would that be a compensation for a replacement for Aaron? Two is, how would what's the connection between that and Lagid b'shvocho, to give the shebach, the praise of Aaron, that he didn't depart, he didn't divert. Kedushas Levi says that if he was charged with the mitzvah of lighting the menorah, his hand would be shaking so much he would spill the oil. Function, the responsibility with surgical kind of an expediting of it, so that he did it shaloshina. He did it as he was charged, and he didn't spill the oil. Hanukkah, the two rabbinic Yom Tovim, Hanukkah and Purim, are really about Torah Shebaal Peh. Really about, they are expressions, functions of Torah Shebaal Peh, but they are also about Torah Shebaal Peh. We spoke about it Purim time, we spoke about it Hanukkah time. Let's just revisit some of the Hanukkah, the menorah feature of how that kicks in, with the Ramban on that brings over here that was the replacement, the compensation for Aaron. The Greeks were after reducing a relativism, a reductionism of Torah Shebaal Peh to be just merely another culture. That was why they wanted it translated in the Targum Shivin, which was less than 100 years before the Maisa with the Maccabim. But if we follow and plug into the issues and challenges, we find that what they wanted to do is lahashkicham Torah Sefer, to make you forget, that Klal Yisrael should forget the Torah. To reduce it, don't deal with it as Torah. It should be dealt with just merely another culture. That's why they initially wanted it translated, and they did it in a devious way, not to tell the Chachomim for what they were being brought. Talmai brought them to Alexandria, which was a capital of Hellenism in the Middle East, and put them in separate cubicles and had them sprang it on them in the last moment that they're being charged with translating the Torah. It was a miracle that they all came up with the same euphemisms to avoid being politically incorrect, to where it might be offensive, without any prior consultation, without any prior planning, and yet they were able to do so. Yet, though there was a miracle, Chazal say, Shlosha Yomov Choshech Yodolon, 3 days of darkness descended upon the earth, because the lion that was formerly roaming free, Klal Yisrael's connection to Torah Shebaal Peh, the Malchus of Torah Shebaal Peh, like the Malchus of the majesty of the lion, was now caged. Why? Because the Greeks could say, you don't have to go to Ponevezh Hebron or Samer, you can go to the University of Alexandria. It's translated, it's cataloged, it's in the library. What mitigated against that victory? They won the battle, but not the war, the Greeks, because they didn't have Torah Shebaal Peh. That they understood, and then they took out after Torah Shebaal Peh. And that is, in fact, the way we would like to learn, that the Greeks, as the Medrash and Brayshah said, that they told the Jews, Kisvu al Keren HaShor, right on the horn of the shore, she'ein lechem chelik b'Elokei Yisrael, you have no portion in the God of Israel. Why write? Why on the horn of the shore? Meforshim there already read into that and understand that, read from it, not into it, that's the way they sent an email, a fax, is that they wrote something on the horn of the shore and sent it from place to place. But there's another dimension here, is that what they wanted was kisfu al kelmasho, write down, now commit on that this to writing, this Teresh Baal Peh. Because as long as it's oral, then it's going to remain the private province, it's going to remain the unique monopoly, the cartel, the international cartel of an in-group. It's Klal Yisrael. And if you want to upset that, disrupt that, what you have to do now is translate it first, and then we can freeze it. Once it's translated, it's frozen. Klal Yisrael avoids it. That's the battle with the Maccabim, because lashkicham Torah, to forget it as Torah, just to reduce it to just being another culture. So Aaron Cohen had to implant in the menorah that would be the source of Chochmah, Harotza Lischakem Yadrim, faces the menorah. Those who wanted economic success would face the Shulchan. But the Yadrim is to face the menorah. That's Chochmah. The Chochmah of Torah is, and the Kaft of Aferach, the aesthetic beauty of the menorah. Reb Tarfon would say, when somebody said a good svara, say Kaft of Aferach, it brings to mind the craftsmanship, the beauty of the menorah. And so the menorah craftsmanship, that is going to be the koach, the aesthetic, to give a new way of what is the aesthetic? The aesthetic is to give me another angle of perception, but here there's another dimension, that Teresh Baal Peh is needed for Klal Yisrael in their march to meet Mashiach. See that from the Medrash earlier as well, that the Greeks, Sheikh Shichu is in Yisrael, and they said, Ein lechem chelik b'elokei Yisrael, but the Bnei Yisosra and others said they wanted Klal Yisrael to forfeit their conviction that there's going to be a Mashiach and that they're going to meet Mashiach. But how does Klal Yisrael continue in its march through the challenges and difficulties and problems and persecutions of Lo Aleinu in history? By the koach of Chiddush, they can innovate, and that Jews can develop minhagim, customs. There'll always be that interaction between that which is the non-negotiable and that which can be a chiddush. There's a difference between shinui and chiddush. Shinui is to depart, to forfeit the connection to the Yud Gimel Midas, the hermeneutic principles, and to say it's free for all, it's random, it's without any design or intent. And we say Chiddush is praiseworthy, it's extolled. Biggest compliment you can pay to Talmud Chacham is he's a Machadesh, but he's not a Meshana. He's not departing from within. He's playing on the field of the Yud Gimel Midas and working from within. There'll always be two crucial governing factors that will make that determination: the range of what can be discussed and the authority that will determine whether or not something has gone beyond that range, overstepped the gvul. And that'll be the balance. So what happens is that the Greeks want to do away with Teresh Baal Peh because that's the private problem. That keeps the Jews Jewish. some of you may recollect that I told the story, which is a true story, that walking home from Ohr Somayach, one Shabbos, we cut through the yard of a workshop which had metal steps, and the fellow that was walking with me from Ohr Somayach that was coming to Shabbos at our home with a few fellows, but one of them was an acoustical engineer, and he said that they can determine by the waves, the sound waves, the longevity of this material, how long it's going to last. I told him it's interesting that he says that, because I can make an acoustical appraisal of a community where there was Teresh Al Peh was learned, they will reproduce another door. It's not just Bonayach, it's Bonayach. They're continuing in the discussion, but it needs the koyach of Chidush to be able to deal with the Talmidei Chacham of the door, and one has to be sufficiently sophisticated to be able to know who the Talmidei Chacham of the door are. That's part of the responsibility of each Torah Jew, is to get to that point that he can make a critical evaluation of cited this before, the Mashiach Chochmah, Parashat Va'era, says that what was immediately unique and apparent about Klal Yisrael is that inasmuch as they were supported in the desert, in the Midbar, by the Man, by the Bear of Miriam, they were protected by the Ananei HaKovod, they were free to learn and free to be a population that was a literate community. So therefore, when they make an evaluation of their leadership, it will be valid, it will be significant, it will have weight. And those who opposed Moshe and Aaron were cataloged. By and large, Klal Yisrael followed. It was a miut de miuta, and we call attention to them as renegades and their rebellion. So now coming back, so lagid b'shvocho shalam, to give the praise of Aaron, that Aaron was now embedding in this menorah that would be the source of chokhmah for Klal Yisrael, the source of chokhmah, the source of wisdom, arotze l'schakem yadrim, that the kafta of aferach, the craftsmanship, the Klal Yisrael would have the koach to be mechadesh without deviating. There's a koach of chidush without deviating. As we said in Parashat Beha'alotcha, that Klal Yisrael is a built-in sense of urgency to be mechadesh, to come up with innovative angles of perception, to meet the specific challenges that are spread around the world. There are different problems in different places. So no Bezdin in Golus is going to have the authority of a Sanhedrin to legislate nationally, federally for all of Klal Yisrael. Therefore, they'll be limited. They'll be limited to the provincial domain, and they will come up with the minhagim, the customs that will achieve the beautiful paradox of changing enough so that they can remain the same. The changes took place on the periphery. They didn't touch the core. And therefore, when Jews, if I have a preference to follow the minhag, the custom of my community, yes, it's a preference. But I can daven with a Moroccan minion, with a Yemenite minion, with a Satmar minion. I can daven with anything that is within the realm of the halacha that did not deviate, that only was mechadish, because we're still essentially on the same page. How do I know who can make the call, the determination? Are you within the norms of the halachic orbit, or have you stepped out? Is it chiddush or is it shinoi? So again, the Talmidei Chachamim of the door, and you and I have to be sufficiently literate that we can understand and know who the players are on the field. And there will always be the democracy of opportunity with an aristocracy of opinion. Democracy of opportunity, anyone can become that godel. But the Rish Lakish, Baal Tshuva, Chazal catalog, great Talmidei Chachamim that came from, that were late bloomers like Rabbi Akiva, who owned up to the fact of his sense of enmity to Talmidei Chachamim before he himself became a Talmid Chacham. Klal Yisrael, on this magnificent paradox that we go through the doors of door after door, of being mechadish, being separated from each other, but this, the magic, the uniqueness of this koach of Torah will keep us bound together as a people. The Ramban says in Baba Basra Yud Beis that the Nevuah, there was a cessation of exposure to Ruach HaKodesh, to the otherworldliness, but it resides in Limud HaTorah, and the Chachomim give us this access. And it's this connection to the oral law, to Torah Sheba'al Peh. And of course, the ultimate irony then takes place. There could not be a Hanukkah without this koach being placed into the menorah. The Chanukiah would be a simulation of that, a virtual revisiting of the menorah of the Beis Mikdash. And not only did the Greeks not succeed, but they, in fact, wound up creating more Torah Sheba'al Peh in the acceptance and prevalence and of the joy of a new Yontov, a Chanukah that pervades Klal Yisrael throughout, wherever they are in Golus. And that koach is what the Ramban was talking about. Yes, the Chanukiah is going to be lit by Israel, by a Levi, not just a Kohen. But had Aaron a Kohen not implanted, embedded, inserted into the menorah that koach of chidush, of innovation, that could be within the norms, that would give us the capacity, the ability to connect to history, Klal Yisrael laterally, wherever they are, however remote it seems their language, cultural differences, but we're on the same page. Not just in the written text of the 5 books of Moses, but in the Daf Gemara, in the Mishnah, in the Daf Gemara, in Torah Sheba'al Peh. And that comes as a result of that devotion of capturing a sense of being able to understand that the impetus of man, the drive to be mechadish, has a platform, has room, unlike those renegades in history who thought that after the Chsimas HaTalmud, the redaction of the Talmud by Ravina Ravashi, there's no more room to be mechadish. Quite the contrary. It seems that the stage for Chiddush might be less, but quite the contrary. It takes a new kind of in-depth relationship to the koyach of Chiddush and the aesthetic dimension, so that it can yet keep us connected. And this is, in fact, what keeps us connected. And though it's printed and published, today written down, the Rebbe took that decision, it had to be written down, because the Golus was going to be so problematic as to not allow, to prohibit the convening of the majority of Talmidei Chachamim in one place at one time, so that we would need the centrality. But now the ultimate paradox is that though it's written down, it remains a Torah Sheba'al Peh. That needed a special siyata d'shmaya. We see from the Rambam that there was a extraordinary siyata d'shmaya, help from above. Needed a certain kind of Ruach HaKodesh to not write down one extra word. Everything, the syntax, the diction, the rhythms of Torah Sheba'al Peh are continually infused with the siyata d'shmaya of the original koyach of Torah Sheba'al Peh. Yes, the acoustics are in place. They definitely testify to the longevity, where you have the sounds of Torah Sheba'al Peh audibly articulated. There'll be another generation of Jews, and there'll be Jews that connect to other Jews. Despite geographic and cultural differences, they'll connect historically, and they'll connect into the future. Always, that's the way it works, is that somebody who's connected to the past can use that as a catapult to connect to the future. Hashem Yiten that we should keep in these pressing times our ability to open up the Gemara, learn with depth, with touching the koach of Chiddush, understanding it from within, not merely as a spectator from without. Yeshua's, refuahs for all of Klal Yisrael. Toda Rabah.